Oh, great. Okay. All right. Well, I couldn't get the Facebook live stream to work, so I went live on YouTube, and now I'm going to share the link on our Facebook page. Oh, great. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, it's I couldn't get the Facebook live stream to work. Yeah, got the echo there. Okay. And now Facebook live stream wasn't behaving, so we are streaming live on YouTube instead. Join us. All right, just one more minute and we'll get going here. Getting things sorted out. And link. All right, great. It is 7 o'clock and I couldn't get Facebook live stream to work, but I got the YouTube live stream to work. So greetings if you're joining us on YouTube, and thanks to everybody that joined us on Zoom as well. Let me take down this little intro slide now. And I'm Sam Jack from Newton Public Library, and I am so pleased to be here this evening with Jim Griggs. Jim is from McPherson, and he is an amazing photographer. Earlier today, or was it? Yeah, it was yesterday, I guess. Was showing me a lot of his wildlife photography and stuff, and trips to Africa. And I was just blown away by it. And night shooting and light painting, really cool topic that I'm excited for him to share with us. Before I turn it over to Jim, I've just got a couple of quick announcements. First off, for Fourth Tuesday, I understand this is my first year, but I understand yeah, we are being recorded. I understand that in past years, this month has usually been like a potluck social, and and COVID kind of complicated that, unfortunately, like a lot of other stuff. But I'm still thinking it would be neat to have kind of a social event to cap the Fourth Tuesday photography year. And I kind of ran this by the folks on our Facebook group, and I was thinking that Tuesday, December 8th at 7 p.m., we could kind of have a more social Zoom where it would just be a show and tell, and ask people that want to maybe pick out 1 to 3 photos, and you can share your screen and display them for the group, and just talk a bit about why you like them, the story behind them, how you shot them, that sort of thing, in a really casual way. And of course, if you don't want to share your photos, you'd still be more than welcome to attend and just give some encouragement to the other people. So I'm going to get that on our calendars and stuff real soon. And I hope that a lot of you will be available. December 8th is not the fourth Tuesday, but that way we kind of miss the holiday weeks. And I hope that'll be a fun way to cap off 2020. So that's that. And then just a couple other things coming up. We do have online book discussions coming up. You can look on our Facebook page or website for more details on that. And then the other thing I wanted to note is our longtime director, Marianne Eichelberger, who many of you know, is retiring at the end of November. And on Thursday, November 12th, we're having a drive-by retirement celebration for Marianne, where and we just posted the Facebook event for that too with all the details. But basically, Thursday afternoon, you're invited to drive by the library, and Marianne will be out, and it's kind of a a modified retirement reception for Mary Ann to applaud all of her great work and impact over the years. So with that out of the way, I will turn it over to Jim. And Jim, you can feel free to start sharing your PowerPoint, and just if you have any, let me know if you need anything from me. And everybody watching, feel free to type comments or questions in the chat during the show, and we can we'll have a Q&A at the end, or if it makes sense, we might interject something during Jim's thing. And here we go.
Okay, right. I guess I'm live, right? I get everything working, so.
Yeah, looks great.
All right, let's talk a little bit about shooting at night and light painting. And I'm going to go through and talk about equipment, certain apps that I use, procedures and tricks and tips. And then the most important thing is just have fun with it. For equipment, probably, the most critical thing is having a decent camera. It doesn't have to be great. I've shot with just a little bit of everything. The one thing you have to have is some way to adjust ISO and some way to go to manual focus. And it would help if you have some way to lock the shutter open for extended period of times, 30 seconds or maybe a minute. And it doesn't really matter what brand. I shoot with Olympus. I used to shoot with Canon. And I'm showing you a decent lens, a Nikkor 24 millimeter 1.8. So I like to shoot with fast lenses if I can, because it minimizes how long the shutter has to be open in order to get the exposure correct. And that sort of I don't know what exposure correct it means for night shooting, but I'll give you some examples here. The other thing that's really necessary is a good tripod. This is I have a version of this same tripod, but the center column, I don't necessarily like to raise the center column because in the wind it tends to wobble a little bit. My tripod has no center column. It's just got a ball head on the top. This is a Physol, which I have a Physol, and then this is a Physol that's got a center column in it. But the important thing about the Physol that I have, even though it doesn't have a center column, it has this hook on the bottom. And the hook is not so important other than the fact that I hang my camera bag under there when I'm out shooting at night to stabilize the tripod a little more, so that if there's windy, and I know it's never windy in Kansas, but it would be nice to have that bag hanging underneath there for the extra weight. Another thing that's I found important about the second or third time I did this was having a chair. It's when you're doing 30-second or 45-second exposures and wait for the noise reduction to finish and all that, you're standing there for quite a while. And the chair does two things. It keeps you relaxed. It gives you a chance to kind of scope things out while you're shooting, and it allows you to lower your tripod so it's down to a lower level, which again makes it more steady out of the wind. So that's another reason for carrying a chair. This is a photo by a friend of mine, Greg Holmes, from I think, if you're trying to remember, he lives in Hutchinson, I'm pretty sure. And I was doing a time-lapse video of the Milky Way with Teeter Rock, and he shot this one of me. So again, the chair is a pretty decent thing to have along with you. All right, let's take a look at some of the apps that are available. One of the things you're going to be looking for is a place where it's dark. We don't have a lot of sky shine or lights. And there's a thing called darksky.org. You can go online there and look that up and find dark sky, what's called certified dark skies, or how dark the skies are around you. And by dark skies, I mean not a lot of city lights. City lights will really mess you up with this. Or you can get their app. It's called Dark Sky Finder. It says for the iPhone or iPad. I'm sure it's for Android as well, but I'm all iPhone stuff, iPhone and iPad. But it gives you a map that shows you where the darkest places are to shoot from, and it's pretty good app. The one I use the most is called Sky Safari, and I've been using it for, I don't know, maybe 12 years now. And it's real expensive, $2.99 the last time I bought it. Sky Safari basically what I use it for is to find out where the Milky Way is going to be at any time I'm out shooting. So if I go out in the afternoon, I say, I'd like to have this thing in the foreground. Where's the Milky Way going to be at 10 o'clock? I can hold this thing up, fast forward to 10 o'clock, and I can look and see where the Milky Way is going to be with respect to this thing I want in the foreground. And that tells me where I need to set the camera up. So I just kind of gives you a chance to scope things out. The first couple of times you photograph the Milky Way, you'll be just thrilled that you actually got a photo of it. The second or third or fourth, fifth time, you'd be wanting to put something in the foreground. So it's not just a picture of the Milky Way. So this Sky Safari really works well for that. That's basically what I use it for. Now, I was in New Mexico several years ago and I was photographing some night sky there, and this white streak came right across my screen. I'm trying to figure out what is that thing, and it just faded out. So when I got back to the room, I looked up and found out that the ISS International Space Station, just passed overhead, and it come in, and when it goes into the shadow of the Earth, it just fades from a bright white light to nothing. And I thought that'd be cool if you knew where it was going to be. Well, it turns out there's a thing called an ISS Finder app, and you can go in and put in the date and time and your location. It'll tell you when the ISS is going to be coming overhead and what time. So I thought I better test it out since I paid for the app, or I don't know if it's free or not. I can't remember. Anyway, I got the ISS Finder app, and I found out the ISS was going to be on the north side of McPherson one evening. So I drove out there and just as a test, took a picture of the ISS at short burst, showing it coming across the sky. So I was pretty excited to find out that app works very well too. Let's go back in time a little bit and talk about a little history. I got my first camera when I was a senior in high school. This thing is quite old. It's like 1955 or something. I got it in 65. But I bought it from a sailor at the Houston bus depot who needed $7 to get a ticket to get home. So he sold me this camera for $7. And I went out, I learned about f-stops and shutter speeds, and I shot a lot with it and had a great time. It shot a lot of slides. I used it on trips and vacations and for a couple of years. It had one setting on it. This thing down here, it says B, and the arrow is pointing to it. You may not be able to read it, but I couldn't figure out what B stood for. So I did some studying and I found that B was bulb, and I got a little, I found that if I held the button down, it would leave the shutter open for a period, as long as I held the button down. So I got a little short cable release I'd screwed into the top, and then I could push the button down, lock it open, and leave the shutter open for a long period of time. So one weekend, I was coming back to college from hiking in Paladero Canyon, and there was a huge thunderstorm going on the horizon. And so I grabbed my camera, I focused it to infinity. I set the thing on B, the shutter speed on B. I got my little cable release out, locked the shutter open, and then I took the camera and braced it up against the window with my shoulder while I drove. Probably not a very safe thing to do, but it's probably a little safer than texting and driving. But I got the slides back, and I had this shot. Now, it's not much, but it's pretty exciting for me because first time I ever tried doing that. I got all this lightning and of course I was going over overpasses and out in the middle of nowhere in West Texas. And so the elevation changed a little bit, changed where the horizon was, where the cloud level was. When I got out of college, I bought this thing, a Canon F1. That was in 1970. I bought this thing and actually bought it in Tokyo for $200 with a 50mm 1.4 lens. And I started leading backpacking trips to Big Bend National Park in Texas, and I became the official photographer because at that point I had two F1s, and I carried those heavy things with lots of lenses, and sometimes I'd forget food. But one of the things that happened in Big Bend is I was laying in my sleeping bag on the ground, looking up at the stars. I thought, wow, those things are bright. I wonder if I get a picture of this. So I dragged my boot over next to me, and we didn't sleep in tents back then. And I set my camera up on my boot. And the F1 is pretty unique in that it had a little lever up by the shutter release that you could push the shutter release down, flip that lever over, and it locked the shutter open for you. So I balanced the camera up there, had it aimed straight up in the air, focused in infinity on had it on the B on bulb setting, opened the shutter, locked it open, took off the lens cap, and I said, I'll get about a 5-minute exposure and see what happens. About 5 or 6 hours later, I woke up and I'm looking at the stars again. And so, geez, my camera, I forgot it was laying there shooting away for 6 hours. So I put the lens cap on, closed the shutter, and went to sleep. When I got home, I got my Kodachrome slides back, and this was the one that was in there, the sky that I did. So now all of a sudden I got hooked on using bulb shutters, and I did that a lot of shooting in bulb mode, all kinds of stuff going down the road. The one that I used it the most for back then was lightning. And this is a lightning storm. At the time I lived in Colorado, and this is looking towards the mountains, and a big thunderstorm rolling out of the mountains that evening. And I did this several evenings, went out on this ridge behind my house, set up my tripod, and I just aimed the camera at something that looked like should have lightning, and I'd open the shutter and leave it open until I saw lightning strike in that area. Then I'd close it and start again. And I did this, I don't know, for 5 or 6 years. When the lightning finally reached us, when the storms reached where I lived, I'd go on the front porch and shoot off the front porch. So I was kind of protected underneath there. And back then there were no carbon fiber tripods, so my aluminum tripod was a pretty good ground. And I didn't want to be out there in the lightning. Lightning shots at night are fairly easy to do as long as you're safe and go about it the right way. Lightning shots during the day, a little tricky. I used to have a thing called a lightning trigger that would sense the lightning and set off my shutter and let me do daytime lightning. There's another way to do it that I was out with Jeff Heidel, and I explained to him how to do that, and he got a really great lightning shot. In fact, I think he sold it for about $400 to a magazine. I didn't get my commission on that, but that's okay. Jeff did a great job on that photo. I'm now using Olympus, and it has a feature called Pro Capture that allows me to do lightning during the day without a lightning trigger. And first time I used it, I was 8 for 8 on lightning strikes. Okay, does it have to be pure dark? There's, the blue hour just after sunset. This is a night shot I did of it's actually a guest house in Scotland on one of the Outer Hebrides. And I just love the lighting and everything. I went out and set up tripod, took that shot. I did some shooting for the McPherson Convention and Visitors Bureau, and they had a thing called Music Under the Stars at the band shell. So they asked me to photograph it, and I went out and did this photo, and it's called Music Under the Stars. I thought, is there some way I can get stars in this shot? So I did another shot. I took off my baseball hat and I held it up trying to block the stage. And it's really hard to do that. And it blew everything out. I could see stars, but everything is blown out, and I could never marry those two shots together. So I ended up with this shot, and I don't know if you can see the stars looking on the screen or not, but there are stars in the sky there. And everybody asked me how I got those stars, and I made up these crazy stories about baseball caps and using my hand to block it. Actually, what I did, this guy's got on a white shirt, so I went into Photoshop and cloned dots off of his shirt up into the sky to create stars. And nobody, except a real astronomer, would tell me I don't recognize those, but they worked for what they wanted for a photo. I got a chance to shoot with Jim Richardson out in the Tallgrass Prairie for about 8 months. He was working on his assignment for National Geographic, and this is one of the things we did. We photographed lightning bugs over a field of alfalfa, and I've got my settings there below: 10 seconds at f4.5, ISO 800, 185 millimeter, and we just focus out there about 90 to 100 feet away, and open the shutter and see what you get. Works pretty well. One caution I will tell you, if you're shooting these days with digital cameras and not film, if you're shooting digital, take spare batteries, because these long exposures really eat your batteries and they knock them down pretty quick. One of the other things I did with Jim, he was looking at the screen on his camera, and I said, how long can you hold still like that? He said, I don't know, 10, 12 seconds. So I had him hold still. I took this shot, 8 seconds at f2.8, ISO 800 with a 16 millimeter lens. And he came over and looked at it. And so do a lot of those. National Geographic loves that stuff. And I know I've mentioned it before, but take spare batteries. The voice of experience, because I went out with 3 batteries and 2 of them are dead, and I didn't know that. So I ended up sitting on the sidelines one evening. Another shot I did of Jim. This is after the moon came up. We'd actually gone out to photograph Perseid meteor shower, but we got blown out that night about midnight when the moon came up. So took the shot of Jim with the moon behind him, and National Geographic used that for their in the field about his assignment for the tall grass prairie. I keep harping on this, take spare batteries. Take spare batteries with you, you're gonna need them. And then this is a shot I did last spring, actually, in Phoenix. Went out in a parking lot, set the camera up. It says 10 seconds, but I'm shooting in something that's called live composite mode, which it takes a series of 10-second shots and stacks them together. And it's kind of unusual in that if you look over in the far left-hand corner down in that bottom sort of corner, you can see a bunch of lights. That's Phoenix down below. And I'm aimed at the North Star, so everything's rotating around the North Star. If I'd shot in regular bulb mode, Phoenix would have just been a big, bright wipeout. But this live composite, it takes one shot and says, okay, we've got all those pixels. It only adds highlights that are added from that point forward. It will not keep adding the energy that's coming off those lights down at Phoenix or any other situation. And I'll show you a little thing here a little bit later. Well, if I'd had live composite when I was doing this, that window on the left side would not be so washed out, because I could get a one shot and then wait for the lightning to add to it. So if you want to do a city scene with lightning in it, the Olympus live composite mode is just a godsend for this stuff, because it'll let you take a picture of the city and do a long exposure. The lightning adds to it, but they don't keep accumulating light from the city lights and the buildings and stuff. Just for grins, we were coming back from shooting a sunset at Maxwell, and I just locked the shutter open and driving down the road, and then pulled in. You can kind of see the tower there and the tree, and it's just, we used to call these power shots. We just go to B and drive down the road or something and take shots. And I got the stars in there because when we stopped, I set up and waited about 30 seconds, and then I closed the shutter so I could pick up the stars. Again, lightning. This is digital days. Really windy. You can see the tree has been blowing around, but that was the most lightning strikes I've ever seen, and that was about a 10-second exposure. Another one, a storm out on the north side of Mac, and that's actually a microburst on the background. And that microburst not flattened a friend's barn, and it actually killed some of his cattle. And it was really pretty amazing that I happened to be out there photographing when all this was going on. I've done night shooting a lot of different places. The darkest skies are in Tanzania and Serengeti National Park. And even with, these are the tents that we stay in there up on platforms. And I just walked out, set the camera down, and took a couple of night shots there. Also kind of a spot that everybody knows about, and this is with the moon out. So the moon's doing the light painting for me. And I've got the stars showing above it. I just kept waiting for a big saucer to come overhead, and a bunch of aliens come out of it. Again, this is out at Tallgrass Prairie, shooting at night after the moon came out with Jim Richardson. And this is way back. This is a Canon 10D, I think it is. So I only went up to ISO 800, so I was kind of limited what I could do with it. But one thing I discovered was if you do long exposures, the clouds move. And I thought that's going to come in handy at some point in my career. I'll need moving clouds in my night shots. Here's another one that I took looking straight up with the clouds moving and the stars, and it was kind of foggy and hazy, not that great. Okay, how do you determine what kind of shutter speed you're going to use? Well, there's a thing called the 500 rule and there's a 400 rule, but the 500 rule is the one I grew up with and I learned. You take 500 and divide it by the focal length of your lens. And then that would be the maximum number of seconds your exposure can be without, and still get what looks to be dots for the stars. Longer than that, and the stars will be little sausages and not dots. They get elongated. So example, if you've got a 500 millimeter, 500 divided by 25 millimeter lens, that's a 20-second exposure. If you've got a 50 millimeter lens, you get 10 seconds. So it basically determines how long an exposure you can do before the stars get elongated. So you have to choose an ISO that'll give you the 20-second exposure with the aperture you have on your lens. And this, I've got a whole handout on this thing that Sam's going to post probably tomorrow morning, as well as some other things I've got in here. This is a little bit longer exposure. If you look at these stars, they're elongated, but it was a very, very dark night and the dark skies in New Mexico. And I wanted those chimney features to show because they were iconic to this place we were staying. So took this shot and sold it to them for their calendar. This is out at Maxwell with the statue of the elk. I did this a couple of weeks ago with an 8 millimeter fisheye at f1.8, ISO 3200, 15 seconds. One thing I'll tell you for sure, if you go out anymore to do this, you're gonna have a lot of satellites going through your images because they're launching tons of satellites, and it's just crazy trying to take a shot without satellites. And this has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 satellites that I can see in it. And this is the tower at Maxwell before they took it down. And I did this 50 seconds at f2.8 ISO 2000 with a 7 millimeter lens. And you can see on the right-hand side, there's something that looks kind of blurry. That's grass blowing back and forth, a big head on this flower thing that was just blowing like mad. The wind was howling, and I was glad I had the tripod down low. And I know some of you guys may have gone out and tried to photograph the comet. I was out there, so I said, yeah, I might as well do that. Just 8 seconds at f2.8 ISO 6400. I'm using a 115 millimeter lens. So I really shouldn't have more than 4 seconds. And if you look at this under a microscope or blow it up enough, those stars are not exactly dots. Okay, one of the critical things for doing this night shooting, especially doing astrophotography, is focusing to infinity. So what I used to do with my Canon gear, I'd get the lens I'm going to use, I'd focus just before dark, I'd focus on something a long ways away, turn off autofocus, and then duct tape my focus ring so I couldn't change it at night, because trying to get it back to infinity is pretty tough to do. Some of the newer cameras, you can go to live view and zoom in on live view and focus. That works okay. But that was really a safe way to do it. And that was one of the things we do at the workshops in Wyoming is have people all come out and we do our infinity setting. And then I'd walk around tape and tape everybody's focus ring. I have a new Olympus EM1 Mark III. It has something called Starry Sky Autofocus, and it works extremely well. I've been using it ever since for all my night shots because I don't have to do this pre-focus to infinity. I just take the camera out, set it on a tripod, put it in Starry Sky Autofocus mode, push a button, it goes, and it finds a star and focuses on it. So I've got, and from that point on, every time you shoot, it stays at that same focus. It doesn't change. All right, let's move on to light painting. And this is kind of one of the fun things to do. I have several small flashlights that I carry with me, including a headlamp for walking in and getting set up. You don't want to use a headlamp too much because you'll be blind for about 15 seconds after looking at it. But I've got all these different lights. Most of the time, I start off shooting about ISO 3200, 30 seconds at f2.8. This thing, this big light, is extremely powerful. If you're going to light up something that's maybe a quarter mile away, you can do it with that. I joke with people that I use it to start grass fires. It's so bright. But the ones that I use for most of the light painting I do is that the two blue ones on the right I use quite a bit, and then the black long one is one I use when I'm doing just details of something that it's not for terrestrial, but for indoor light painting. Okay, we'll move on. Let me just explain about the big light. A lot of people think you need a lot of light to light up trees or something. No, the problem is you're doing a 30-second exposure. That bright flashlight, I mean, it may only have to be on 125th of a second, and your trees are lit up. And I cannot turn my light on and off in 125th of a second. So I go with a much dimmer light and I use it for 20 seconds. And the difference between 18 or 20, 18, 20 or 22 seconds is negligible. The difference between 125th of a second and a half second, it's great. And it'll just blow out your shots. And I'll show you some examples of trying to use that big light. So this is in the Badlands of South Dakota, and I was photographing the Milky Way there above these features, and I was trying to figure out which light to use, and I moved to a little bit different location. I looked, and all of a sudden the hills lit up. There was a car coming from way around the corner. So I used the car for light painting. He lit up my hills for me. And then I took another shot, and he was a little closer and lit him up a little bit more. So you just take advantage of what's there. If you got some kind of ambient conditions that will give you light painting, that's pretty handy to do. This is at Teeter Rock. I think I was out there that evening with Jeff. And that's one of those little bitty pin lights. It's a single LED, and I'm lighting it up with that LED for maybe 10 seconds out of this 36 seconds. This is also Teeter Rock. This is just before sunrise. And a cloud bank was hiding Venus over there, which is pretty bright. But again, I'm using a very small LED just to light it up. And I don't want to light the ground up in front of me. So I start at the base of the Teeter Rock and pan up so that I light the whole rock, but I don't want to light up the ground in front of me. It's at our workshops in Wyoming. And this is one of the cabins. So the cabin's lighting up some of the trees, but you'll also notice that the trees have got a little bit of light on them. And I'm doing that again with a small LED flashlight to light up the trees. So I've got some other ones of these I'll show you in a second. What do you do when the moon's out? Well, the moon does the light painting for you. You can't photograph the Milky Way, but you can get some pretty cool shots. This is 20 seconds at f4.5 ISO 1600 with a 9mm lens. And you can see pretty good detail in the ground, and the stars show up nice. Sky looks good. I moved up a little closer to get a shot of the entrance to the ranch and the mountains, the stars. Again, full moon, lit it up very nicely. The only other thing that I carry, and I didn't show in the first one, is this. I carry my laser pointer, and I don't have any samples of that yet. I'm still playing around with it for doing some things with it. It's kind of interesting what you can do with a laser pointer. And so that's a work in progress. All right, this is from several years ago. I was in Joshua Tree National Park in California. This is 30 seconds at f4.5 ISO 3200, 8mm lens on it. It's equivalent to about a 14 on it because I was on a 1.6 crop body. But the tree's got a little detail in it. And that's because there was a car way far away, just putting enough light on it to light it up. So then we got to a point where there were no cars that were this point we were on shooting. And all you have is the hillside lit up. That's from the city down in the valley below Joshua Tree. And this is 30 seconds at f4.5 ISO 3200 8mm. This is the same. And I'm going to start changing white balance. Everybody said, what white balance do you use? It doesn't matter. Change it, make it whatever you want. There's a little bit bluer. There's really blue. So you just make the white balance whatever you want. Well, I really wanted to paint this tree up, and the only flashlight I had was this big bright thing. So I thought, you know what? I'll put my fingers over the end of that baby, and I'll be able to use that flash. I can tone it down a little bit. I forgot how wide that wide angle lens was. So the very first pass I made, I got a real nice shot of my fingers going by with that light shining through them. I didn't get much light on the tree, but as I tried to use the silly thing, I just kept getting hot spots, bright spots, but not enough. I couldn't get uniform because that light is just too bright. And I realized about 100 feet away, parked just off the side of the road, we had a van parked there. So I walked over to the van and I opened the door, And the interior light lit up everything for me perfectly. Now the white balance on that interior light is really orange, 12-volt light. So I took it in the Lightroom and took out the red took the red channel down to 0. Ended up with pretty good light painted tree just using the interior light of a Dodge van. I got a meteor in this one. That white streak on the left is a meteor coming down. So luck. I wasn't planning on it, but take luck. The other thing that you might try if your camera has that capability is time lapse. And I hope this video works, but I set the camera up and you'll see some lights on that tree. I wasn't light painting. That was cars coming around curves way far away, but I just did a real short time lapse of I'll do it again. With the dark moving in and the stars moving and planes going overhead. So I was really bored when Christmas Eve, kids were gone, nobody was coming home. I called Jeff Heidel. I said, Jeff, what are you doing? He said, nothing. I said, good, we're going out to Mushroom Rock and do some night shooting. So we went out there and I did some light painting on this one mushroom rock. That's part of the Milky Way, but the core of the Milky Way in the winter is down here below the horizon. Can't see it from here, but we did some light painting with that. One of the things that I discovered pretty early because my lens frosted up, is that you fog up your lenses, they frost up when it's cold and cool out. So I started investigating things I could buy for my lens, and there are people that make these devices for keeping your lens unfogged. I discovered just get hand warmers, get those things activated, and then run a piece of tape, or not tape, but a rubber band around, hold them against your lens. They'll keep your lens frost and fog free. So that's a tip that's really easy to do. Keeps you from wasting a time of shooting a real long exposure where you're going to have the stars rotating, and all of a sudden the last 15 seconds of it, you lose everything. It's all gone because of fogging on your lens. Had a friend in from Colorado, and he wanted me to teach him how to do Milky Way shooting. So we went out to Chase State Fishing Lake. This was in August, and that white streak up there is a plane going overhead. The greenish yellow streaks are lightning bugs flying around in front of us out there. I didn't do any light painting on this. That's 30 seconds f2.8 ISO 3200 with a 7mm lens on one of the cheapest micro four thirds bodies I own. My friend had his Nikon D850 with a 28-2.8. He set everything identical to mine, and this is what he got, pure black. And I said, did you leave your lens cap on? He said, no. I said, okay, try it again. So this time I light painted, thinking maybe I get a little light in the image, he could see it. 30 seconds, f2.8, ISO 3200, 7mm. This was his, and we went up to 4,000 on his, still black, nothing there. So I went again, I shot it again, I light painted again. He went up to 6,400, same thing, pure black. And I'm trying to figure out what the heck is going on. I know a Nikon 850 is a great camera. He should be getting something. Anyway, I shot one more. He still got black. He said, it's late, let's go home. I said, all right. We got in my truck and he's packing his gear away. He said, do you think I should have taken off my polarizing filter? I said, oh, no, don't tell me you had that polarizing filter on. Of course. I mean, it's like 3 stops. So he said, okay, I know how to do this. So you want to get out and do it again? He said, no, I know what to do. I just got to take that filter off. Somebody had told him in a class he should always shoot with a polarizing filter. So he had it on and ruined his Milky Way evening out there. There's another one. I did a pretty long exposure here, 70 seconds at f4, ISO 3200 with a 17mm lens. And the only reason I did 70 seconds is because I was out there with a group shooting, and they were, I'll explain that in a minute, but one of my friends, Dwayne Graham, was walking by and had his flashlight in his back pocket, and it had a red filter on it. And I thought, he's going to walk through the keyhole. I need that thing lit up. So I just waited for him to walk through and do the light painting for me on the keyhole with his red flashlight. This is out at Monument Rocks. Shooting as a group, anything more than about 6 or 8 people is pretty difficult to control because everybody wants to do their own light painting. Everybody's shooting at different shutter speeds or different ISOs, time. So when I do it as a group, I say, okay, we're all going to shoot at this and we're all going to shoot for 30 seconds. And I'll count down 3, 2, 1, shoot. And then I do the light painting. And then when the time's up, everybody's camera stops together. Everybody gets to look at it. Sometimes you get people with the f5.6 lens and they got to go a little bit higher ISO or something. You just make adjustments after you shoot that. All the stuff we do at the ranch is done that way. Here's another one from the ranch in Wyoming where I've light painted the trees, the cabin, and the surroundings, and I've got this nice sky above it with the Milky Way. The thing about a group, when I was at Monument Rocks, it kind of deteriorated. There were about 20 people out there and everybody's doing their own thing and people turn on flashlights, and it just got to the point where I said, okay, I'm through, and I packed up my gear and left. But you just, you can't have a lot of people doing their own thing and expect your results to be very controlled. This is out at Carhenge in Nebraska, and I went out there one night to shoot, and you got the city lights are so bright that you're just lucky if you can do anything. They did do nice rim lighting on the cars, and I had the clouds moving overhead, which I'd learned about shooting with Jim Richardson out in Tallgrass Prairie many years earlier. And one of the kind of a spooky thing, I did use one of those little flashlights to light up the cars. Otherwise they'd be silhouetted and you wouldn't see the wild sunflowers and the grasses in the foreground. And then my favorite, this is again down in the Badlands in South Dakota. And I drove down to this little spot and got out and hiked in, took this shot using a little bitty 1 bulb LED light to paint that with. Now, let me explain something to you. I'm going to take a similar shot. This is one that hasn't had anything done to it, except I've taken the exposure up in Lightroom by 1 stop, and that brightens up a little bit of everything, including the Milky Way. And I was slightly underexposed on this shot. And then I go into the brush tool, and I use the brush tool, which is this thing, and I go in and paint with a brush tool over the Milky Way. And that dot, if you hover over it and you have auto mask turned on, it'll show where you've painted. And then you can see I've got my feather set at 81, my flow at 50, and the size is whatever it has to be to fit the Milky Way. And I make a couple of passes over that, and then I go in to dehaze, and I run the dehaze up to about, well, I go to 100% start with, and I back it off until I get the detail that I want to show up in the contrast and detail will show up in the Milky Way. And then I can go up and play with temperature and tint to change the colors a little bit. Again, it only affects the areas where I painted with the brush as long as I'm in the brush tool, all these adjustments. So you do everything within the brush tool. And then here's the original. There's after it's been adjusted and light painted and all those adjustments in Lightroom. Okay, I'm going to move away from the Milky Way for a second. We did a couple of shoots out at Bosque del Apache, and included with that, we go up to the VLA, the Very Large Array. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to go out there and photograph those antennas with the Milky Way above it? So I called and talked to him and said, I got a group, about 8 of us want to come out. Can we photograph out there at night? They said, sure, we'll send you the forms. It's $12,000 for the night. And I said, I think we'll just take our chances and not do that. But they think everybody's a motion picture director or something. And they charge pretty high numbers to have access to their facility at night. So I went out, I took an underexposed shot, and I faded in the Milky Way above it. I said, it's close enough for government work. I did the same thing. This is at the ranch. I went out, set my tripod up. I took a vertical shot. I had rocks at each leg of the tripod, know exactly where it was. Had the camera locked down. I took a shot of the Milky Way. I came back in and set my alarm to get up before sunrise. Went out, set the camera up on those same 3 spots, and took another shot so that I've got enough light from the sun. The sun's not up. It's just the sky's getting light. And I got another shot with the cabin and the trees, and I just blended the two together in Photoshop. Somebody asked me if I ever photographed a meteor shower, and no, I've done fake meteor showers. They're pretty easy to do. You set the camera, look straight up, and then zoom it while you're shooting, and you get a meteor shower. Nobody would buy that as a meteor shower, but that's what I did. Okay, using a flashlight. This again is sort of like light painting. I've got this owl up on a post at the workshop. Had a guy shine the flashlight for me, and I took a photo of him. So we went in the barn, and we got a boot with a spur and a black background, draped it over some saddles, and then set the boot up there. I set the camera up, my camera up on a tripod, 60-second exposure. Had somebody trip the shutter. I went over and light painted it with those little bitty LED lights. And you walk over after a minute and see what it looks like. Do another one and see where you need to add light or something. You just keep doing it until you get it right. With live composite, I could have done that in one shot because I can see as it's building up. It shows you on the screen. Just flip the screen around where you can watch it. So live composite, the Olympus. And I'm not selling Olympus. I don't care whether you like them or not, but I'm hooked on the things. They do so many things well. So here's a little sample. I was going to show you the little thing I did just for my own. Thought it'd be kind of cool. I had a little Nikon body. I set it up. I got my Olympus with the live composite. I got out some colored gels and some of my lights. And that long thing's called a wandini. It's a wand that has LEDs in it. And I did a live composite on the Nikon. I kept changing the filters that I was holding over the flashlights and adjusting the color. Here's another one I did. And here I was playing with a laser pointer, right in Nikon with the laser pointer, hitting some of the chrome spots and in the lens, and kind of funky looking. I didn't really like it. But here's another one I did. And I used different color gels. I did quite a bit of exposure. And I took some colored cellophane and I just wrapped it around one of those flashlights, all wadded up like a flower, turned the light on, ran it in and out of the lens. And I was hoping it looked like light streaks. I need to work on this a little bit, figure it out, make it work. And then just for grams, I did another one, sort of the same thing with my gels and those pen lights. And then I got that wand, which has different color lights on it, and I ran it all around the camera, leaving light streaks, blinking light streaks, all kinds of weird things. And I'll show you some really cool examples of what that does. Okay, so night before last, or maybe it was last night, I guess it must have been last night. I went downtown and I was going to get car streaks of cars going by. There weren't too many cars out last night, but this is live composite. With live composite, I open up the camera, I have it shoot a series of 20-second exposures. Actually, these were 15-second exposures. And it's shooting 15-second exposures. The very first one captured the buildings, the lights, the concrete, the sidewalk, and all it added was the car streaks going by. Now, if I'd gone to B mode and shot in B, number one, I can't see what the camera is capturing because it's doing it without me being able to see the screen. And it keeps adding light and adding light. So the street lights lighting up the sidewalk and the street just blew everything out. In 30 seconds, I had nothing but washout. This over here is about 2 minutes. That's 30 seconds with B. Here's another one I did with more traffic coming through, a couple of trucks. And again, it's live composite. And you can see the red light, the yellow light, and the green light. All three were on and off at certain times, but it didn't blow them out. It just it added the ones that weren't there before because those are new highlights. Here again is using B, and that's a truck going by, and that's about a minute, 1 minute exposure, 45 seconds. All right, what else can you do just dinking around in your own house when it's at night? I set up a little wooden block, got out some of my favorite rock collections here. This is a garnet mica schist, and set it up and took it with white light. And then I used 3 different gels and pen lights and live composite, quartz crystals, and I used, again, gels on those little pen lights. Got some pretty amazing colors going on there. This is from gypsum down in the Gypsum Hills, and I light painted the front to be pink and the top to be blue, and a little bit of green thrown in here and there for good luck. I'm not even sure what this is, but I light painted it too with those gels and it worked pretty good. Okay, these are the gels. I think it's called a Wandini. It's about 15 bucks from Amazon. There's a lot of those available. If you're looking to buy these gels, here's a whole set that's made to fit on a flash. And you can use them with a flashlight too, it doesn't matter, but 12 bucks. And you get all these different colors. And you can use them with those little pin lights and light paint all kinds of stuff. The wands come anywhere from like $14 El Cheapo to some very expensive, some of them are $200. And you can use those to light up people. And some of those things will change colors, the wands do. So you can do one side in blue, switch it to red, go around, do the other side like they did with this example here. This is a $56 wand. My cheapy wand, I did this yesterday. Had my wife sit in front of our black background. I used a flash with a softbox to light her up. And in live composite, the first shot will trigger a flash. After that, it just is doing, it won't trigger the flash. I went around behind her with the wand and did all this goofy stuff to show what it looks like. The one thing your model has to do is sit perfectly still. Otherwise, you get this black edge where she's moved a little bit. And it just slightly, but if they can sit perfectly still, it works really well. Okay, I'm going to show you a photo. This is by a guy named Joe Edelman, and he shoots all Olympus. And this is live composite, one of his models, and he's using about a $150, $200 wand in the background, wanding around with it. Some pretty interesting effects he does. Here's a link to his website, and you can go watch him do demos and talk about how he does this and explain to you how to do it if you don't have Olympus, how to do it with B, the bulb mode on your camera, and come up with some pretty respectable images. And believe it or not, I gave all this to Sam, including screenshots of my my Lightroom settings for doing the Milky Way. And I got a PDF on Milky Way shooting. When I wrote that PDF years ago about shooting the Milky Way, it was pretty difficult to do. Some of the crop cameras were a little bit behind the full frame cameras. And I say in there that you had to have full frame cameras. I'm now shooting with Olympus, which is a 2x crop factor. And I have no issues at all getting those to work. So I am going to stop right there and take that off.
Great. Thank you, Jim. That was really interesting. And I'd never really thought about being so creative with light painting. So that's really fun. We can have some time for Q&A now or comments. Those of you on Zoom, everybody is welcome to type questions or comments in the chat. Or if you're on Zoom, you can actually raise your hand or just ask in the chat, and I can turn your microphone on if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment verbally as well. And so John had a question that he earlier. Have you ever used early stages of the moon right before or after a new moon to light paint and still get Milky Way pictures?
Yes, yeah, you can do that. Fortunately, you got to be careful about where the moon is with respect to the Milky Way. It's got to be off to one side or the other. It can't be tracking right with the Milky Way, which would pretty much obliterate it, unless it's just a quarter of the moon or less. But yes, I have done that. We've done that in Wyoming a couple of times. So it does work quite well. Now, see the other question about being at Monument Rock at night. And yeah, you're not supposed to be out there at night. That was done. The ones that I did out there were done 12, 13 years ago. Back when you could go out there and do that. So yeah, don't try and do it at night on your own. If you really get good at this, the Nature Conservancy would like to have some pictures of taken out at Little Jerusalem with the Milky Way in it, and they will give you permission to go down inside and down inside the off the trails. In other words, down below and shoot at night there if you offer to give them photos in exchange for that right. If you're really nice. I've been out there and done a couple of things, not Milky Way yet, but you got to do it in the summertime. The nice thing about being out there in the summertime is the snakes are out too. So.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. I still need to get out there and check it out. A question here from Willie. Do you find that LEDs work better than regular incandescent bulbs when light painting? And how important is degrees Kelvin?
It doesn't make a lot of difference. In fact, back when I was helping Jim Richardson, I was his assistant on his shoot for Geographic. He had color correcting gels that he put over his flashlights for illuminating things. So he had read the color on his lights, and he knew what degree Kelvin they were, and he adjusted them with color correction CC filters that he carried. And they were flexible CC filters, just like the little cheapy things that I have. By the way, these are, when I talked about flexible pieces of cellophane, colored cellophane, I've used those for filters as well. The thing about it is, it's nice if they all match and you get the same white balance all the way across. But for the most part, just getting any kind of light, as long as you don't want it to look like daylight when you light up things in the foreground, like trees or something. You want them to look pretty natural. And you're not going to light them up really bright, because then somebody said, well, how'd you do that? Use a flash? You could probably use a flash for that. But I don't worry too much about it. I've used incandescent flashlights for a long time. In fact, for a long time, all I had were these, I don't know what they are, Brinkman. And they work pretty well because you can zoom them and focus them. But since I've gone to LED lights, they last so much longer. And the batteries don't go down as quick. So I use nothing but LEDs these days. And they're slightly different depending on who makes them and what kind of glass they're putting over the front of it. So not huge. I see a question about the hand warmers. Okay, and what I do is I take those hand warmers, I get one activated. I just kind of fold it around my lens and take a rubber band and hold it against the lens. And they're not really, I mean, they're warm. They're not really hot if you're out on a really cold night. All you're gonna do is keep your lens warm enough so it doesn't fog up or frost up. I hope that answers your question, Lisa.
Yeah, and that could have been, I used to take photos at football games, and that could be handy. Maybe that would have worked sometimes when I struggled with fogging during cold football games, So
Yeah, they work really well. It's pretty impressive. The night that Jeff and I shot, I had one of my little cameras on it, and it was all black. And I set it up to do a long exposure, and we went and sat in the truck because it was so cold. When I went back out, my little black camera was all white. And it frosted up so bad the lens couldn't see. I mean, the camera literally had just disappeared in frost, totally coated, and shut down because the batteries were dead.
have you ever had a lens crack because it got too cold or something like that?
No.
No, that's good, I guess.
I haven't dropped one either. Hope.
Yeah. Yeah, knock on wood. I had a question. Did you say that you spent months in the tallgrass prairie with Jim Richardson on some sort of assignment, or what
Yeah,
was
he
that?
had actually Jim called me. I've been doing workshops in the Flint Hills and I've done a lot of shooting at the tallgrass prairie for the Nature Conservancy, and also for the organization that was trying to get it made into a national park. I donated several hundred images to them to lobby Congress, and they got it made into a national park. But he called me and said, "I know you've done a lot of work out there. You don't be ashamed, to say no, but would you be willing to share with me some of your favorite places?" And I said, "Sure." So he said, "I'll pick you up Saturday," and we went out and shot together for about 8 months. It was really a tremendous learning experience for me because until you've been around the National Geo guys and see how they work. And I go out and I go, I got 4 or 5 shots, I'm good. Now, he's got 500 or 600 shots before he says, maybe I got a good one. And they just keep working at it and working on the lights, working on the directional light. So it was a really, really good learning experience. And it was kind of fun because he said that was the first guy he'd ever shot with that had ideas that were different than his. So we'd bounce ideas off each other and come up with crazy things to try. And then some of them worked, some of them didn't, but if you don't try them, you never know. So yeah, it was great. Jim's a great guy. I don't know if you know him or not. But.
No, but I've heard about him quite a bit, and I think when I was in high school, I had a classmate who actually had cancer, and she's since recovered. But she actually got to do a Make-A-Wish foundation thing, and she was an avid photographer, and her Make-A-Wish was to go out and shoot photos with Jim Richards, a National Geographic photographer, and Jim did that, and he's really generous guy to do that, and she had a wonderful time. Willie had another question. How would you shoot the Aurora Borealis, the Northern Lights, or have you ever done that?
I did it when I was shooting film. They were really blurry, but it's there's a couple of websites that have good explanations for it. Before I went to do that, I would look them up and read it. I haven't done it recently. I've since got a really good friend who lives in Seward and has invited me up there to photograph the Aurora with him. So I'm probably going to do that, not this year, but next year. And I'm looking forward to it. As far as how to do it, there's a lot of stuff on the internet that'll tell you how to do it. I've only done it once, and it was in Canada, and it was back in the film days at ISO, Kodachrome 64, ISO 64, and it's a different world today with ISO 400, 800, 1600, 7 million, whatever you're going to shoot it at. You've got a lot more opportunities for it. But yeah, I would look it up online. Don't go by what I'm telling you, because I've only done it just a couple of times with film.
Yeah.
And I found out that I'm a winter wimp because I've now bought a house in Arizona. I go down there for the winter. So cold weather goes right along with Aurora, and I think I'm allergic to cold now.
Yeah. Lisa asked, have you ever tried a fisheye lens for a night shoot or a wide angle?
In fact, the picture that I had of the elk statue was done with an 8mm fisheye. And yeah, fisheyes work great. I've got a couple of different fisheyes. I've got the 8mm 1.8, which is tremendous lens. It's great for that. And then I've got a cheapy fixed, it's a 9mm something, Samagon or whatever those. There's some cheap brands. When I say cheap, they're $230, $250, $300, and they do a really good job. They're all manual, but so what? You're in manual anyway when you're doing this night stuff. Fisheyes quite well. It's kind of hard to imagine how close you can be to what's going to be in your foreground with that fisheye, because it is extremely wide. And then my normal lens I use is it's equivalent of a 14 to 28 2.8 on my Olympus gear. So 14 I consider really good. 14 to 24, that range is really a good range for doing night shooting.
Jennifer asked, do you know what the Olympus is doing in the live composite mode? Is it essentially taking long exposures and then modifying them as it goes?
No, it's taking individual shots. You go in and you tell it, I want you to take 3-second or half-second or 10-second exposures. And you do the original shot. When you shoot it, it'll trigger a flash if you've got a flash hooked up to it. And it'll also capture everything that's out there. And then it says, those pixels are locked, and it doesn't even use those on the sensor. It only uses the rest of the pixels, and it's looking for more highlights to add to it. So, and it composites. It takes a series of images and composites them together.
And I wonder if you could take. Is there a way to export the composite, and then if you want to eliminate one capture from the composite or something?
No.
No.
Yeah. No, we can't do that, unfortunately. Not yet.
Not yet. Maybe well, they've got to have a model to sell for next year, right? So
Yeah. Well, you know, the new models, the new one I've got also has built-in neutral density filters. If I want to do blurring water, I can dial down like 9 or 10x neutral density and get the water to be soft and flowing. So there's a lot of features that it was a game changer. I mean, honestly, I've been doing this since 1965, and I was getting bored with photography. I mean, not bored is not the right word. I wasn't excited. I didn't mind. I loved going out shooting, but I wasn't really excited about somebody saying, let's just go do this. I didn't, man, maybe. But when I got the Olympus stuff, it did so many weird things and so many fun things that I was ready to go try it again. And I mean, it's only a 20 megapixel camera, but it'll shoot the new models. There's one of them that shoots 80 megapixel. And the way it does it, you have to be on a tripod. But basically it uses the sensor shifting around for stabilization. And what it does when it does this 50 megapixel or 80 megapixel motion, you shoot and it moves the sensor half a pixel, a bunch of different directions, and then adds all those pictures together to give you 50 megapixels. And it's, I wondered where that came from. And it came from CIA spy satellites. When, you know, they use those from high above the earth when they only had 10 megapixel sensors, they got 30 megapixels out of them by doing that.
wow, that's amazing. And I think you mentioned something that might be relevant to Willie's question here. What about long exposure with a waterfall at night? He'd like to get a waterfall and the Milky Way together.
Yeah, yeah. I've done some stuff with a lake, which reflected in a lake. It's going to be pretty still. Waterfall, you can do it. I've got friends that have done that. Unfortunately, in Kansas, there's not a whole lot of waterfalls that I think you can get to with the Milky Way showing. That I'm not really sure. Again, you might, the ones I know about, the waterfalls I know about are kind of trees around them and you block the sky view. But I know some places in Oregon I can do it. And see, a couple places in California I can do it as well.
Yeah. Lisa asked, do you know if the live composite is the same as an HDR photo, or how those are different? The high dynamic range.
Yeah,
No,
it doesn't change. It doesn't change exposure. You set the f-stop, and you tell it how long shutters to be using, and it just takes multiple shots. So anything that's changed position or any brightness that's been added, like lightning or fireworks, those will be added. But the base exposure that you got of whatever's in the foreground stays the same. Like the picture of my wife, that's basically live composite. And the nice thing is I got the camera set up across the room with the screen turned towards me, and I'm doing this painting. I can see what it looks like because it shows up on the screen while I'm doing it. It's live.
So it's like analyzing and comparing each pixel that it captures, I guess, that, you know, with a really powerful computer program to do that, I'm sure.
Right. It's built into the camera, and somehow, I don't know, just people are pulling strings or something. I don't know how it works, but it does an amazing job of shooting a series of photos. And if you want to go out and do, just a word of warning, if you want to go out and do star trails around the North Star, and if you want to get big circles, one of the things I recommend you get, they have what's called a dummy battery that'll fit in your camera. It's got a cord coming out that goes to a huge battery bank that'll power your camera, because the little battery in there probably is going to be good for an hour, maybe. If you're talking about a 4 or 5 hour exposure, you got at some point open the thing, put a new battery in, start over again. It's just nice if you've got one of these dummy batteries with the cord going to a big, if you know what voltage it is, a big battery bank. They have some that are AC. So if you've got an inverter that you can bring along with you, I got a power pack for powering my studio strobes in the field, its battery, it would power my Olympus cameras at night for probably 3 or 4 days, 10 days. I don't know, long time.
Willie asked, Jim, in your opinion, what hemisphere is better for night photos, northern versus southern, and summer versus winter? I don't know if you've been down to the southern hemisphere to take photos.
I actually took, I was in the rainforest in Peru, and I was walking back to my grass hut. We're staying in grass huts along the Manu River. And I looked up and I said, oh my God, the Milky Way. So I went in and got my camera and my tripod and set it up. Got a little flashlight to light paint the trees and my tent. And I shot a picture of the Milky Way in the rainforest, which is cloudy about 360 days a year. And I happened to be there one night when it was crystal clear and the Milky Way was there. So I have shot in the southern hemisphere. Africa, when we're there, we're below the equator about 300 miles. The most critical thing is just being where there's no city lights. And the further away you can be from civilization, the better off you are. And just for, I mean, this is kind of weird, but my Olympus, I've got the equivalent of an 800 millimeter lens on it. The other night I went out, set it up. I knew where Jupiter was. I knew where Saturn was. I took 800 millimeter shots of them. Came back, loaded them into Lightroom, and then blew them up. I could see the rings of Saturn. I could see 3 of the moons of Jupiter with just my camera and an 800 millimeter lens. And I just thought, that's just incredible. You know, when I was a kid, I'd give anything to see the rings of Saturn. You know, now I can take a camera out and take pictures of it. So,
yeah,
and it doesn't. They're bright. You know, you don't need a long exposure. Something like a 30th of a second or 60th of a second at f5.6 or f8, and shoot it and you got it. You know, just have to worry about a mirror coming up, which I don't have to worry about with the Olympus because I can go to silent mode, nothing moves. There's no mirror slap, no shutter. It's totally silent shutter. So, which is a good thing and a bad thing. I had a group of us at the workshop one year, and they wanted to get a group shot of all of us. So I handed my Olympus camera to the lady who runs the ranch, and she was going to take pictures, and she was going to hold the button down, and she kept saying, "It's not working, it's not working." Because I had it in silent mode, and I didn't realize that. It was shooting 60 frames a second. So I ended up with about 240 pictures of all of us standing there. Rather embarrassing. I had to go, I wanted to turn on the noise and went to regular shutter so she could hear it when she shot, but you know.
Yeah. That's pretty cool that they can eliminate that shutter jiggle too. It's a good thing.
Just Lisa, what I would say to Lisa again, if you're really intrigued by this, go to YouTube and just type in Olympus Live Composite, and there's a lot of YouTube guys that explain what they do with it and how they do it, and some of the crazy things they're doing with this stuff. It's really cool. And go see Joe Edelman. Joe's a crazy guy. I talked to him on the phone, I don't know, 6 months ago. And I thought I was going to talk to him for 10 minutes, ended up being almost 45. He goes 100 miles an hour from Pennsylvania somewhere, and he's one of the most creative guys I've ever heard. But he does nothing but people, portraits, and that's it.
Cool. Well, thanks again. You know, I think these are really, especially I like the ones of the Badlands just because you've got that bare soil, and it's like you kind of feel that cosmic, like, you know, like, wow, we're on a rock in space, because you can see the bare rocks and then the Milky Way and stuff. So that's a cool thing about these kind of photos. Jim, yeah, it's a great presentation. Thank you again, and hope we can have you back sometime soon and show off some of your other great photos.
Sam, you might tell everybody where you're going to put those links and stuff.
Yeah. Everybody that registered on Zoom, I will email it out to everybody everybody, I think, provided their emails to get into the Zoom room. So I'll email it out to everybody that was in the Zoom. And then if you're watching on YouTube, I'll post the link also on our Facebook page. So,
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. It was enjoyable, and I'm leaving Saturday for Arizona. So it a little bit earlier this year because winter came here a little earlier.
Yeah, well, enjoy the warmth.
I will. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Oh yeah, Marianne says thanks too. Marianne says Cindy and you enjoy your time in Arizona and keep in touch. That's Marianne. So
Oh yeah.
all right. Bye everybody. I'll sign us off now.
All right.